The gleaming halls of the Zephyrian Imperial Command echoed with the sound of polished boots as Commander Vexithar strode through the corridors. His silver armor bore the crimson markings of the Queen's elite guard, and his 4 arms moved with practiced precision as he adjusted his ceremonial weapons. Today was supposed to be a routine inspection of the newest recruits to the Galactic Defense Initiative, but Vexithar had heard disturbing rumors. A human had been accepted into the program. The very thought made his mandibles click in disgust. Humans were a primitive species that had only recently discovered faster-than-light travel. They were soft, weak creatures with only 2 arms and pathetic sensory organs. What could such beings possibly contribute to the most elite military force in the galaxy? As Vexithar entered the training facility, he immediately spotted the anomaly. Among the towering Chronac warriors, the crystalline Vitharians, and the multi-limbed Zephyrians stood a single human. The creature was unremarkably small, barely reaching the chest of most other recruits. Its pale skin looked fragile, and it possessed only the most basic of appendages. The human wore the same training uniform as everyone else, but on its diminutive frame, the gear looked almost comical. Vexithar approached the training instructor, Sub-Commander Ray Lin, who was demonstrating combat techniques to the assembled recruits. "Sub-Commander," Vexithar's voice carried the authority of his rank. "Explain to me why there is a human among our elite candidates." Ray Lin, a seasoned Vitharian whose crystal skin reflected the training facility's lights, turned to face the commander. "Sir, the human designated as Marcus Chen passed all preliminary examinations. Queen's orders were explicit about accepting qualified candidates regardless of species." "Qualified?" Vexithar's laugh was a harsh clicking sound that echoed through the facility. Several recruits turned to look, including the human. "This soft creature barely looks capable of lifting a standard plasma rifle, let alone wielding it in combat." The human's expression didn't change, but something flickered in its eyes. Marcus Chen continued to observe the demonstration, apparently unbothered by the commander's words. This only irritated Vexithar further. "Very well," the commander announced loudly, ensuring all recruits could hear. "Let us see what this human is truly capable of. Marcus Chen, step forward." The human moved with quiet confidence, approaching the commander without hesitation. Up close, Vexithar was even more unimpressed. The creature's eyes were small and inefficient, its limbs thin and obviously weak. How had such a pathetic specimen even survived long enough to reach adulthood, much less qualify for elite training? "The standard combat assessment involves 3 trials," Vexithar explained, his voice dripping with condescension. "Physical prowess, tactical thinking, and weapons proficiency. Are you certain you wish to embarrass yourself in front of your fellow recruits?" Marcus looked up at the towering alien commander. When he spoke, his voice was calm and steady. "I'm ready for the assessment, sir." Vexithar's mandibles clicked again in what passed for cruel amusement among his species. "Excellent. We shall begin with physical prowess. The test involves traversing our obstacle course while carrying a standard equipment pack weighing 200 Imperial units." The other recruits murmured among themselves. 200 Imperial units was challenging even for the strongest species represented in the group. For a human, it would be impossible. The equipment pack alone weighed nearly as much as the small creature. Sub-Commander Ray Lin activated the obstacle course, and the facility's training arena transformed. Barriers rose from the floor, climbing walls extended upward, and various hazards activated throughout the space. The course was designed to test every aspect of a soldier's physical capabilities. Marcus examined the equipment pack, testing its weight and balance. To the observers, he seemed to be struggling just to lift it properly. Vexithar exchanged amused glances with several of his fellow officers who had gathered to witness the human's inevitable failure. "Begin when ready," Vexithar commanded. What happened next would later be discussed in military academies across the galaxy for generations to come. Marcus didn't try to muscle through the course like the larger species typically did. Instead, he moved with a fluid efficiency that seemed almost supernatural. Where others would climb over obstacles, he found ways to move through or around them. Where brute strength was expected, he applied leverage and momentum. The first barrier was a 12-foot wall designed to test climbing ability. Most recruits would scale it directly, using their natural strength or species-specific advantages. Marcus approached at an angle, using the equipment pack's weight to his advantage as he swung it up and over, then pulled himself up with movements that wasted no energy. Vexithar's confidence wavered slightly, but he told himself the human had simply gotten lucky. The second obstacle was a maze of swinging pendulums, each weighing enough to crush a careless recruit. The test required perfect timing and spatial awareness to navigate safely. Most candidates moved slowly and carefully, timing each dash between the deadly weights. Marcus seemed to see patterns that others missed. He moved through the maze with an almost dance-like quality, never breaking stride, never hesitating. It was as if he could predict exactly where each pendulum would be at any given moment. By the time Marcus reached the third obstacle, the entire training facility had grown quiet. Even the other recruits had stopped their own exercises to watch. The final physical challenge was the most demanding, a series of platforms suspended over an energy field that would deliver a painful but non-lethal shock to anyone who fell. The platforms moved in complex patterns, requiring recruits to leap from one to another while carrying their equipment. This was where most candidates failed. The timing required was precise, and the penalty for miscalculation was immediate and uncomfortable. Larger species often relied on their reach to make jumps that smaller beings couldn't attempt. Marcus stood at the edge of the first platform, studying the movement patterns for several long moments. Vexthar was certain the human was simply delaying the inevitable failure, trying to find courage for an impossible task. Then Marcus moved. He didn't just jump from platform to platform, he seemed to flow through the air, using the momentum from each landing to propel himself to the next position. Where other species used brute force to make the leaps, Marcus used physics, timing, and an understanding of motion that defied explanation. In one particularly impressive sequence, Marcus used his equipment pack not as a burden but as a tool. He swung it ahead of him to a platform, used the momentum to increase his own jump distance, then landed precisely where the pack had been, catching it as it bounced. When Marcus completed the obstacle course, the training facility was absolutely silent. His time wasn't just competitive with the other elite candidates. It was the fastest anyone had recorded in over 3 standard years. Vexthar stared at the readout in disbelief. This couldn't be right. The human had not only completed the course, but had done so in a way that demonstrated capabilities no one had expected from such a primitive species. There must be an error in the timing system, Vexthar muttered. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. Everyone had witnessed what had just happened. Marcus stood calmly at the finish line, barely breathing hard despite having just completed one of the most physically demanding tests in the galaxy. He looked up at Vexthar with those small, inefficient eyes, and the commander saw something there that made him uncomfortable. Intelligence. Not just intelligence, but a kind of deep, calculating awareness that seemed to take in everything around it and process it in ways that Vexithar was only beginning to understand. "Shall we proceed to the tactical assessment, sir?" Marcus asked politely. Vexithar felt the first stirrings of something he hadn't experienced in many years: doubt. But he was far from ready to admit that a human might be capable of anything truly impressive. The physical test could have been luck, or perhaps humans had some unknown adaptation that hadn't been properly documented. The tactical assessment would be different. It required complex strategic thinking, the ability to coordinate multiple variables simultaneously, and the kind of military insight that took decades to develop. Surely this was where the human's limitations would become apparent. "Very well," Vexthar said, his voice less confident than before, but still carrying the weight of his authority. "The tactical assessment will determine whether you possess the mental capabilities required for elite service." As the training facility reconfigured itself for the next test, Vexthar told himself that what he had witnessed was an anomaly. Humans were still primitive, still weak, still unworthy of serving alongside the galaxy's elite warriors. He was about to discover just how wrong he could be. The tactical assessment chamber materialized around them as the facility's advanced holographic systems activated. What had been a simple training room moments before now resembled the command deck of a massive starship. Tactical displays showed star charts, fleet positions, and constantly updating threat assessments from across a simulated galaxy. Commander Vexithar gestured toward the central command station with two of his four arms, while his other hands adjusted various controls. "The scenario is as follows, human. You are commanding a small fleet tasked with defending the Kepler mining station from a Void Raider attack. You have limited resources, inadequate intelligence about enemy capabilities, and civilian populations to protect." Other recruits gathered around observation platforms to witness the assessment. The scenario Vexthar had selected was known throughout the military academy as the impossible choice. It was designed to have no perfect solution, forcing candidates to demonstrate their decision-making process under pressure rather than simply finding the right answer. Marcus approached the command station and began examining the available data. The situation was indeed dire. Intelligence reports indicated a Void Raider fleet of unknown size approaching the mining station. The defending force consisted of 3 light cruisers, 2 destroyer escorts, and a handful of fighter squadrons. The station itself housed over 50,000 civilians who could not be evacuated in time. Traditional military doctrine suggested 3 possible approaches: establish a defensive perimeter around the station and hope to outlast the attack, attempt to intercept the raiders before they reach the station, or evacuate what civilians possible while preparing for a fighting retreat. Vexthar watched as Marcus studied the tactical display, expecting the human to become overwhelmed by the complexity of the situation. Most candidates spent considerable time analyzing each option before selecting what they believed to be the least catastrophic choice. Instead, Marcus began issuing commands with startling confidence. "Order the mining station to begin emergency power cycling of all industrial equipment," Marcus said, his fingers moving across the control interface with surprising familiarity. "I need complete power grid specifications for the entire facility." Vexithar's mandibles clicked in confusion. "That information is not relevant to the tactical scenario. You should focus on fleet deployment and defensive strategies." Marcus glanced up from the display. "With respect, sir, everything is relevant. The mining station processes rare earth elements using high-energy particle accelerators. Those accelerators can be reconfigured." The human's hands moved across the controls with increasing speed. On the tactical display, new information began appearing as Marcus accessed systems that most candidates never even considered: mining schedules, power consumption patterns, cargo manifest data, even personnel rotation schedules. "What are you doing?" Sub-Commander Raylin asked, her crystalline features reflecting genuine curiosity. "The Void Raiders rely on quantum tunnel drives for their hit-and-run tactics," Marcus explained while simultaneously coordinating fleet movements. "Their ships enter normal space at predictable vectors based on gravitational lensing effects from the nearest star. The mining station's particle accelerators can be synchronized to create an artificial gravity well." Vexithar felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. The human was describing theoretical physics that most spacefaring species had never mastered. That's impossible. The power requirements alone would... Not if you route power through the station's fusion reactors in sequence, Marcus interrupted, his attention never leaving the display. The energy cascade can be sustained for approximately 14 minutes, which should be sufficient. As Marcus worked, the tactical scenario unfolded around them with stunning complexity. The simulated Void Raider fleet appeared at the edge of the system, their dark ships seeming to bend light around them as they advanced toward the mining station. Instead of arranging his fleet in traditional defensive formations, Marcus scattered his ships throughout the asteroid field surrounding the station. To any observer, it appeared he had abandoned defensive doctrine entirely. "Your ship positions make no tactical sense," Vexthar protested. "You've eliminated any possibility of concentrated firepower or mutual support." Marcus finally looked up from his controls, and there was something in his expression that made the commander step backward involuntarily. "Sir, human military history includes over 4,000 years of recorded warfare. We've faced impossible odds against superior enemies more times than any other known species. We've learned that when conventional tactics fail, you create new ones." What happened next defied every principle of space combat that Vexthar had ever learned. As the Void Raider fleet approached the mining station, Marcus activated his modified gravity well. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Raiders' quantum tunnel drives became unstable in the artificial gravitational field, forcing them to drop out of their advanced propulsion mode and engage in conventional space combat. But that was only the beginning of Marcus's strategy. The scattered defensive fleet wasn't positioned randomly after all. Each ship occupied a position that would create overlapping fields of fire once the enemy fleet was forced into a specific approach vector. Marcus had calculated exactly where the destabilized Raider ships would emerge and positioned his forces accordingly. The mining station's cargo transport system, which Marcus had spent precious minutes analyzing, became part of the battle plan. Automated cargo pods, normally used to transport processed materials, were loaded with improvised explosive devices and launched on intercept courses with the Raider fleet. "This is madness," Vexthar whispered, but he couldn't look away from the tactical display. The simulated battle unfolded with clockwork precision. The Void Raiders, accustomed to hit-and-run tactics that relied on superior mobility, found themselves trapped in a conventional engagement where Marcus's defensive preparations gave his smaller force devastating advantages. But even more impressive than the tactical innovation was Marcus's ability to coordinate multiple complex elements simultaneously. While directing fleet movements, he was also managing the mining station's defensive systems, coordinating civilian evacuation efforts for non-essential personnel, and adapting his strategy in real time as new variables emerged. When a simulated equipment failure disabled one of his cruisers, Marcus immediately incorporated the damaged vessel into his battle plan, using it as a decoy to draw enemy fire while his remaining ships repositioned for more effective attacks. The entire engagement lasted 37 minutes. When it concluded, the Void Raider fleet had been completely destroyed with minimal casualties to the defending force and 0 civilian deaths. The training facility fell silent as the simulation ended and normal lighting resumed. Several of the observing officers were staring at Marcus with expressions ranging from confusion to awe. Vexthar examined the tactical assessment results multiple times, certain there had been some kind of error. Not only had Marcus achieved a decisive victory in a scenario designed to be unwinnable, but his approach demonstrated strategic thinking that incorporated elements from physics, engineering, logistics, and psychology. "How?" Vexthar asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "How did you even know about quantum tunnel drive vulnerabilities?" Marcus powered down the command station controls. "Human scientists have been studying theoretical faster-than-light propulsion for over 2 centuries. When we finally achieved interstellar travel, we had already identified the weaknesses in most existing drive technologies. It's one of the advantages of being late to the galactic community. We had time to study everyone else's methods. The implications of this statement hit Vexthar like a physical blow. If humans had been analyzing galactic technology for centuries before making contact, what other capabilities might they possess that no one suspected? The weapons assessment, Vexthar said, his voice hoarse. There is still the weapons proficiency test. Sub-Commander Raylin stepped forward. Sir, perhaps we should— No, Vexthar cut her off. The assessment will be completed as scheduled. Marcus nodded calmly. I'm ready to proceed, sir. As the facility prepared for the final test, Vexthar told himself that this would be different. Physical capability could be compensated for with clever tactics, and strategic thinking was merely intellectual exercise. But weapons proficiency required instincts that took years to develop, muscle memory that came only from extensive training, and reflexes that no amount of theoretical knowledge could replace. Surely this was where the human's true limitations would be revealed? Surely this was where the natural superiority of evolved warrior species would finally assert itself. The weapons assessment chamber activated around them, and Vexthar selected the most challenging scenario available. If the human wanted to prove himself worthy of elite status, he would face the same test that had eliminated candidates from species with centuries of warrior tradition. What Vexthar didn't yet understand was that he was about to witness something that would fundamentally change how the galactic community viewed humanity, something that would make him question everything he thought he knew about warfare, evolution, and the nature of predatory species. The human was about to show him why Earth had never been successfully conquered by any force in its entire 4-billion-year history, and why that fact should terrify anyone who considered humans to be prey. The weapons assessment chamber transformed into a nightmarish combat environment. Hostile terrain stretched in every direction, filled with cover positions, elevation changes, and deadly obstacles. Multiple target systems activated, creating an array of threats that would challenge even the most experienced warriors. Commander Vexthar gestured toward the weapons rack with grim satisfaction. Select your primary and secondary weapons. You will face multiple engagement scenarios against adaptive combat drones programmed with the tactical patterns of 12 different hostile species. Marcus approached the weapons display with the same calm efficiency he had shown throughout the previous tests. The available arsenal represented the finest military technology in the galaxy. Plasma rifles capable of melting through starship armor, particle beam weapons that could disintegrate targets at the molecular level, and gravitational pulse devices that could crush opponents without leaving visible damage. To Vexthar's surprise, Marcus bypassed the most advanced weapons entirely. Instead, he selected what appeared to be a relatively primitive kinetic rifle and a simple sidearm that fired solid projectiles rather than energy beams. Those are obsolete weapons, Vexthar protested. Why would you choose inferior technology when superior options are available? Marcus checked the weapon's action with movements that spoke of deep familiarity. Sir, these weapons may appear primitive, but they possess advantages that energy weapons lack. They function in electromagnetic interference, they're unaffected by energy shields, and they have psychological impact that advanced weapons often don't. Vexthar's mandibles clicked in derision. Psychological impact? We are conducting a combat assessment, not attempting to intimidate opponents. With respect, sir, intimidation is a combat multiplier, Marcus replied, shouldering the rifle and testing its balance. Human military doctrine recognizes that defeating an enemy's will to fight is often more effective than simply destroying their ability to fight. As Marcus completed his equipment check, Vexthar activated the first combat scenario. The chamber filled with hostile targets as combat drones materialized throughout the environment. These weren't simple training devices. They were sophisticated units programmed with actual combat data from galactic conflicts spanning thousands of years. The first wave consisted of drones programmed with Kronak assault patterns. These massive, heavily armored units relied on overwhelming firepower and aggressive frontal attacks to crush opponents. Against such enemies, most candidates attempted to use superior weapons technology to penetrate their defenses or find protected positions from which to conduct ranged engagements. Marcus disappeared. One moment he was standing at the starting position. The next he had melded into the terrain so completely that even the chamber's advanced tracking systems struggled to maintain target locks. This wasn't technological stealth. This was something far more primitive and infinitely more effective. The first Kronak drone died before it realized it was under attack. Marcus materialized from behind cover that shouldn't have been adequate to conceal a child, much less a grown human. His kinetic rifle spoke once, and the drone's central processor exploded in a shower of sparks. Vexthar leaned forward, studying his tactical displays with growing concern. The human's movement patterns defied conventional combat doctrine. Instead of seeking superior firepower positions or attempting to outmaneuver his opponents, Marcus seemed to understand exactly how each enemy type would behave and positioned himself accordingly. The second Kronak drone turned toward the sound of weapons fire, following its aggressive programming. It never detected Marcus, who had already moved to a different position and fired from an angle the drone's tactical algorithms hadn't anticipated. Within minutes, the entire first wave had been eliminated. Marcus had used precisely 12 shots to destroy 12 opponents, each kill demonstrating an understanding of drone construction that suggested he had studied their specifications in detail. Impressive efficiency, Sub-Commander Raylin observed. But the next wave will be more challenging. The second scenario activated, filling the chamber with drones programmed to emulate Vitharian crystal warriors. These opponents moved with supernatural grace, their crystalline bodies refracting light to create multiple false images while they attacked with precision energy weapons. Against Vitharian tactics, most candidates relied on area effect weapons that could damage multiple potential targets simultaneously. The Crystal Warrior's speed and defensive illusions made precise targeting nearly impossible for most species. Marcus took a different approach entirely. Instead of trying to track the false images or predict movement patterns, Marcus closed his eyes and stood completely still. For several long moments, he appeared to be meditating while deadly opponents advanced from multiple directions. "What is he doing?" Vexithar demanded. "The human has lost his tactical awareness." Then Marcus moved, and Vexithar realized he had been witnessing something beyond his comprehension. With his eyes still closed, Marcus began engaging targets with supernatural accuracy. His kinetic rifle tracked and fired at targets he couldn't possibly see, each shot finding its mark, despite the Vitharian illusion technology that was confusing the chamber's own targeting systems. "Impossible," Raylin whispered. "How is he tracking them without visual contact?" Marcus opened his eyes as the last crystal warrior fell. "Humans evolved as persistence hunters on a world filled with predators more physically capable than ourselves. We learned to track by sound, by scent, by the displacement of air currents, by vibrations through the ground. Visual hunting is only one sense among many." The implications of this revelation sent a chill through every observer. Most galactic species had evolved past such primitive hunting instincts, relying instead on advanced technology and superior physical capabilities. The idea that maintaining such primal skills could provide tactical advantages had never occurred to them. Vexthar activated the third wave with growing desperation. If primitive hunting instincts could overcome advanced combat programming, perhaps overwhelming numbers would expose the human's limitations. The final scenario filled the chamber with 50 combat drones representing a composite of the galaxy's most effective warrior species. The engagement was designed to be impossible. No single candidate was expected to survive. much less achieve victory. Marcus surveyed the overwhelming odds with the same calm expression he had maintained throughout the assessment. Then he did something that made Vexithar question everything he thought he understood about combat. Marcus began to hunt. There was no other word for what Vexithar witnessed. The human didn't fight the drones, he stalked them. Moving through the chamber with fluid grace, Marcus turned the assessment scenario into his own personal hunting ground. Individual drones found themselves isolated from their units, cut off by terrain features that Marcus manipulated to his advantage. He used their own programming against them, exploiting the predictable patterns that made them effective against conventional opponents. When drones attempted to coordinate attacks, Marcus was never where their tactical calculations predicted he would be. When they tried to overwhelm him with superior numbers, they found themselves funneled into kill zones, where his kinetic weapons could eliminate multiple targets efficiently. Most unnervingly, Marcus seemed to be enjoying himself. There was a predatory satisfaction in his movements, a hunter's patience in the way he selected targets, and a terrible efficiency in the way he eliminated opponents. As the engagement progressed, Vexithar began to understand something that chilled him to his core. The human wasn't just defeating advanced combat drones, he was doing so using methods that predated galactic civilization by millions of years. While other species had evolved beyond their predatory origins, humans had refined those instincts into something approaching an art form. They had taken the raw survival skills that had allowed them to thrive on one of the galaxy's most dangerous worlds and adapted them to high-technology warfare. When the last drone fell, the weapons assessment chamber fell silent except for the hum of cooling weapon systems. Marcus stood among the debris of 50 combat units, his breathing barely elevated despite having just accomplished something that military analysts had considered theoretically impossible. Vexithar stared at the assessment results, reading the same impossible statistics multiple times. Perfect accuracy, 0 missed shots, maximum efficiency ratings across all categories, and most disturbing of all, estimated psychological impact on enemy forces rated as catastrophic. How? Vexithar asked, his voice barely a whisper. How is this possible? Marcus secured his weapons with practiced movements. Commander, humans have been at war with something for our entire evolutionary history, our world, our climate, our predators, other humans, disease, starvation, natural disasters. We've never known peace. Every day of human existence has been a struggle for survival against impossible odds. The human paused, and when he spoke again, there was something in his voice that made every alien in the chamber instinctively step backward. We didn't become apex predators by being the strongest or the fastest or the most technologically advanced. We became apex predators by being the most persistent, the most adaptable, and the most ruthlessly efficient killers our world had ever produced. What you've witnessed today isn't advanced training or superior tactics. It's 40,000 years of evolutionary refinement specifically designed to eliminate threats. Marcus looked directly at Vexithar, and the commander saw something in those small, supposedly inefficient human eyes that would haunt his dreams for years to come. Sir, humans don't just fight wars. We are war. We are the product of a world that tried to kill us for millions of years and failed. Every challenge you've presented today, every impossible scenario, every overwhelming threat, my species has survived worse than this, every single day for our entire existence. The training facility remained silent for a long moment as the implications sank in. Sub-Commander Ray Lin was the first to speak, her crystal features reflecting the chamber's lights in patterns that indicated deep thought. The other species, she said slowly, we've all had natural advantages. Strength, speed, natural armor, advanced senses. Humans had none of these advantages, so they became something else entirely. Marcus nodded. We became survivors, And sometimes, being a survivor means being something that other species aren't prepared to understand or defend against. Vexithar reviewed the assessment results one final time, then activated his command communicator. "This is Commander Vexithar to Queen's Command. I am recommending immediate acceptance of candidate Marcus Chen into the Elite Guard, with a notation that human capabilities require significant revision of current threat assessments." He paused, then added, "I am also recommending that we begin immediate diplomatic overtures to ensure that Earth remains a strong ally of the Galactic Federation. The alternative implications are concerning." As the recruits were dismissed and the training facility powered down, Vexthar found himself contemplating a disturbing possibility. If this single human could accomplish what he had witnessed today, what might an entire planet of such beings be capable of? For the first time in his distinguished military career, Commander Vexthar found himself grateful that humans seemed to prefer peace. Because if they ever decided to expand their territory through conquest rather than diplomacy, the galaxy would face a threat unlike anything in recorded history. The Queen's Elite Guard had gained a formidable new member. But more importantly, the galactic community had been reminded of a fundamental truth that would reshape interstellar politics for generations to come. Sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones that don't look dangerous at all.